It's a minute or so after 5, but just give Matt another minute or so to tune in. There's Leslie. Well, should we give Matt another couple minutes, or should we just get started and he can tune in progress? Y'all, okay. So let's, I'm gonna call this, oh yeah, so, yeah, this is Pat Bradley. I'm calling this meeting, this May 14th, 2020 meeting of the Lexington Planning Commission to order. We are on a Zoom meeting, and before we get going, Arnie, would you like to read the statement of emergency and authority to proceed?
Sure thing. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the City of Lexington is taking actions to minimize attendance at public meetings. An ordinance was approved by City Council on April 2nd, 2020, and in accordance with the Virginia Code Section 15.2-1413, allowing any meeting which requires the physical presence of members of a public entity such as the Planning Commission to be held through real-time electronic means without a quorum physically present in one location. A notice of this meeting was posted to the city website, as was the meeting packet. The meeting will be broadcast to the city's Facebook page and then uploaded to the city's YouTube channel afterwards. We ask that each speaker identify themselves when speaking. All votes will be by roll call and recorded in the minutes. All members of the Planning Commission who leave the meeting or arrive must verbally note their attendance. Are there any questions from the Planning Commission about the procedures for holding this meeting? If not, I'll go ahead and take attendance. Chair Bradley.
Present.
Vice Chair Driscoll.
Unmute, John. Please.
I'm present.
Commissioner Gooden.
Present.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Chester.
Here.
Commissioner Strawn.
Leslie, unmute.
Unmute that. She's having trouble. She is
Okay.
visually
She's-
indicating that she is here.
And Commissioner Tuckler.
I'm here.
Okay. We do have a quorum. Mr. Chairman, please proceed.
All right, thank you. So, yeah, one of the important things is we'll try to identify ourselves when we speak, and I will try to do my best to recognize folks when they're going to want to speak. You can just visually raise your hand or just speak up if nobody else is speaking. So at this time, we will look to approve the agenda. Do we need to have any clarifications or additions?
This is Camille. I move to approve the agenda.
All right, Camille moves to approve. Do we have a second?
Jamie, second.
Jamie has a second. All in favor? We'll have a roll call vote for this as the others. Is that correct? I think so. So Camille?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Leslie? She puts her thumbs up. Jamie?
Yes.
Blake?
Aye.
And Matt?
Yes.
And this is Pat, and I also approve, so the motion carries. We will move on to approval of the minutes of the April 23rd, 2020 meeting. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to look. Do we need to make any corrections, clarifications? If not, would someone like to make a motion to accept? Camille's raising her hand. Yes, Camille?
There were two minor corrections in the minutes that Bonnie's already handled, and I'm losing my place on, here we go, on page 6 of 7 of the minutes. That first paragraph, it ends with, she also said applications today are in reference of the current comprehensive plan. And I need your guidance on this. What I intended to say was that applications we acted on today reference the current comprehensive plan, and a similar role of the plan in future decisions should be considering when reviewing the draft of the comprehensive plan. I'm either happy to have that change added to the minutes or just have the last two sentences of that paragraph deleted.
This is Pat. What do folks think? Bonnie, do you want to weigh in on what's easiest for you, or anybody have any opinion on this? Maybe the easiest thing would just be to strike those two sentences. Would that be okay? All right, hearing nobody. Anything else, Camille?
Move to approve with corrections.
We have a second.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. We'll have a roll call vote. Camille?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Leslie? Signaling thumbs up. Matt?
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Blake?
Aye.
And, wait a minute. Matt, you're on here twice.
Yeah, because I can be on one's on my cell phone, one's on my computer,
Okay.
and it just makes it easier so I can see the documents. But I
Okay.
want you guys to see my smiley face.
Okay, and Pat says aye to complete the approval of the minutes. Matt, you are upside down in the video that is.
No, I'm not. Am I?
Okay. All right. That's up to you. All
Now you
right.
know how my students feel.
Yeah. Okay. Before we move on to new business, we will open the floor to citizens' comments on matters that are not on this evening's agenda. And I see some folks are here in attendance. We're not on the commission. Would any of those like to comment? You can unmute and make yourself known if you'd like. All right. Seeing and hearing nobody gesture for comments. We will close the citizen comments on matters not on the agenda. We will move on to our first order of new business, which is an application by Paul A. Levengood for a comprehensive plan amendment, number 2020-01 for the George C. Marshall Museum on the 1600 VMI parade map. All right, we'll start with Arnie and a staff report.
Okay. This is a little bit of a review for you in that I believe it was in February that you saw this application along with a preliminary subdivision. The request really stems from, and Bonnie, if you don't mind going to page 3, the request stems from a desire to change the property boundary, and you've seen this diagram before, where the building for the Marshall Museum actually encroaches over the property line and part of the property line extends out into Anderson Drive. The applicant at that time requested a rezoning to the C2 zoning district, and they've now since that time have changed their mind and would like to request the C1 zoning district. And that did not go to council. It got held up in this COVID timeout. And before it does, they would like to change their request from the C2 to the C1. I misadvertised for the last meeting and did not include the correct future land use designation, and it was deferred from your last meeting to this meeting. It has been advertised with the C1 zoning district and with the updated future land use designation, which is the mixed use commercial office residential designation. That's all I have for a presentation if anybody has any questions.
Hey, this is John. Did we receive any comments about it?
No comments whatsoever.
I think.
This is Pat. Any other questions for Arnie? If not, we'll see if the applicant would like to make a statement.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I really don't have anything more to say than I said last time. VMI is very much on board with this as well. They're our only neighbor in this situation. And we as Arnie mentioned, we just have reconsidered the C2 designation and are now asking for a C1 designation simply because of the front setback. We don't have any plans to change anything on the building, but wanted to make sure that if 50 years from now there was some reason to do that, that people had the my successors will have the flexibility to go forward with that. We just thought that was the most prudent. So nothing really more to add.
Great. This is Pat. Thanks, Mr. Levingood. Are there any questions for Mr. Levingood? Okay, is there any, we're gonna see if there's any public comment on the matter. Seeing, hearing no one gesture, we will close the public comment. We have a discussion and a recommendation from the commission.
Sorry, I was muted during this. Question, Marshall Foundation is separate from VMI. Is that correct?
Correct. We're a fully private 501c3.
So when you said VMI is your neighbor, that's what you mean? That they're
Correct.
separate?
Correct.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt. All right, do we have any other discussion, or would someone like to make a motion regarding this? No one wants to.
Pat, I want to make sure I'm right because I've got a lot of paperwork here going on.
Yes,
We're specifically talking about the suggested motions having to do with CPA 2020-01 and RZ 2020-01. Is that correct?
this is first for the CPA 2020-01. We're doing
Right.
them one at a time.
Move to approve CPA 2020-01 as presented.
This is Blake, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. This is Pat. We'll call a roll call vote. Please express when I call your name. Camille?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Leslie? She mouths aye. Okay, Matt?
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Blake?
Aye.
And Pat says aye. Okay, that carries. We will move, yes, Camille.
Move to approve rezoning application RZ 2020-01 as presented.
We might want to first, I think we have to do the full shebang on this, I think.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay. So we will move on to the application for the rezoning 2020-01. Arnie?
No further comments to add from what's already been stated.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Levingood, have you said everything needs to be said?
I think so.
Okay, good. Is there any public comment on this matter? Seeing, hearing none, we'll close that and we will talk about the discussion and recommendation. Camille?
Move to approve rezoning application RZ 2020-01 as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
John?
Second. Second.
Matt got in there. Matt got in there for the second. I heard him first. Okay, we got a motion and a second. If you're in favor, express that. Camille?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Jamie? Blake?
Aye.
Leslie? Leslie seems to have disappeared from the screen. Am I correct in that? Okay, Leslie, she may have had technical difficulties. Leslie is not here for this vote, and Pat here says aye. So that will carry. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Levingood, for tuning in. Welcome to stay.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to our next order of business, which is will be, I suppose, our main bit of work this evening, which is a review of the first half of the comprehensive plan chapters. And hopefully we'll maybe able to get through the introduction and all the way through to the housing chapters. So I think the way we're going to want to proceed on this is first talk about, see first if we have any comments on the overall structure of what we have seen for the draft, anything from a structural perspective, an overall layout perspective, so kind of a big picture comments. Then after that, I think Kelly Davis of the Berkeley Group will lead us through a chapter by chapter look at this draft. We've had some comments submitted from members of commission. We've had some outside comments, which I'm sure we will discuss. If you have anything that's of grammatical or formatting sort of non-substantive comments or requests for corrections, you can compile those. And I think Kelly's asked that if you can get those to her by Monday, that would be a big help. If it doesn't seem like something that needs to be discussed, but just grammatical and so forth. Does that sound like a good way for everyone for us to proceed? Okay, and we will have, yes, John.
I think Camille has some.
I'm sorry, Camille, go ahead.
The first thing I want to say, and then I want to talk about the process, is Kelly has endured a lot moving with us in this process from November through now. And I think I would be remiss not to say that the work that she's done is commendable and notable. And the reading of this was dramatically different, and it was just truly delightful. My concern about going through a chapter by, and I do want to hear from Kelly, my concern about going through a chapter review is we've done that now several times. And I think we need to kind of move back to 40,000 feet and in line with John's comments, which I found very compelling. And actually, once Kelly's finished, I would love to hear John kind of expound on that, because I think he's got some great insights, and I would actually subjugate my comments to his. And so I don't know that a chapter by chapter, I think if we do chapter by chapter, we could be here until midnight. But if we go with more of a 40,000, because I think that's where we might be at, I think we could be highly productive. That is just my opinion, and obviously other members of the commission need to weigh in.
This is Jamie. I totally agree.
Thank you, Jamie. And well, so, and by the way, let me back up. This is Pat again. I should have asked if Arnie wanted to introduce anything in this, or did you have anything to say preliminarily? Arnie shaking his head no. Okay. So what do we think about that? Should we ask Kelly what her preliminary introduction would be to this, and move from there, and see how it all unfolds? That sound good? Okay, so how about we hear from Kelly? See if she has any comments. So Kelly, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think at this stage, thank you, first of all, for having me here today with you. I do want to introduce my team, because they are just as responsible for the efforts that you've seen as myself. So John McCoy is with me. He's going to be taking detailed notes for us tonight and making sure that we record your changes appropriately and make sure that we're all on the same page. And then Catherine Redfern is on with me as well, and she is responsible for the wonderful mapping that is included in this draft of the chapter, and much of the land use has been through her support as well. So appreciative of them. And then of course, Drew, CEO with Berkeley Group, is on with me as well. So just wanted to introduce my team. And
Pardon me, Kelly. Hey, Matt, would you mind put yourself on, at least on mute?
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I just wanted to introduce my team. They may be chiming in to help me with any questions throughout this time, but we'll try to say our names first. Just a few notes that I wanted to make in response to some of the comments that we've received. Thank you to those of you that did provide comments. They were really helpful to us in making sure that kind of where at least some of the members of commission fall, and so that they have been really helpful. What we're going to try to do is compile all of those. We have developed a slightly more detailed comment spreadsheet than what we've provided in the past. Just we have done some initial internal drafts and looking through that today. Not quite at the stage where we were ready to share that with you all, but we will try to note the Planning Commission resolution. So because at this stage in the game, we do want to make sure that changes that are made from here on out that are not truly restructuring and that major level of changes that we had in this draft are documented for you all, so we can send that to you, make sure that we haven't misunderstood any of the changes that were requested. I also just want to note in the PDF that you provide, or that was provided to you, that was a lower resolution document than you will ultimately see. That's just the nature of our times right now and having to provide that reduced size PDF, but we do have high quality graphics for you that were just kind of reduced due to the need to reduce the size of that document. So I just wanted to make those two notes. I would like us to start with that structural discussion and appreciate Mr. Driscoll's comments on that and the table that you provided. I wish that I had done that myself, so I appreciate that a lot, John. And generally, we do agree with the structural comments that Ms. Miller and John had provided as well. I do think it's important for us to discuss strategies, and there was a few comments related to strategies that I do want to make sure that we address through each chapter. I think we can keep it to high level, what's missing and what have we perhaps misinterpreted the commission's desire on policy. So those would be how I would focus our discussion of the chapters, is how we need to perhaps shift the strategies, the policies. So that's my suggestion for tonight.
Thank you, Kelly. This is Pat again. I'm a little bit at a loss now about how we think we're going to proceed. I'm looking at the agenda, by the way, and I realize I'm not quite sure how it's, whether did we just take care of the comprehensive plan final draft? Was that the introduction and number 2 was public comment, then we discuss? Arnie, could you, it just occurred to me, I'm not quite sure what our agenda says we should be doing in terms of order right now.
That you're still in the comprehensive plan final draft. There's the discussion of that.
Okay.
So as Kelly mentioned, I think you may want to talk about structure a bit.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Okay. So yeah, let's do that. Is there anything that anyone would like to say from that point of view, from the overall structure of things?
This is Kelly. I just want to note that we provided that cover memo that kind of outlines some of the major changes. I can highlight those really quickly for you, for everyone on the call. And the primary changes that I would like to point out are that we have removed much of the demographics information from the historic chapter to make a standalone historic resources chapter. That to me is one of the largest changes in this draft. That seemed to be well received from the commission comments that we were provided, although Mr. Driscoll had made the comment that we needed to perhaps provide an introductory look at the community in the introduction chapter, and we are agreeable to that as well. The other major changes are this idea of kind of that parallel structure, and so we've tried to do that. Mr. Driscoll had pointed out some of the places where we had missed that or had just kind of had some oversights in achieving that. And so our intent is that if it's agreeable to the commission, we would follow the general structure for each planning element of introduction, planning context, and I'm doing this out of memory now. So, and then the initiatives, the partnerships and initiatives, and then the main structural comment was that we really need to have an existing gaps subsection prior to the goals, objectives, and strategies in each chapter. And we are agreeable to that as well, but want to recognize that some chapters, you just don't have as many gaps or any gaps such as historic resources. And we would just want to, we'll just basically note that. So that was, I just wanted to make those few comments for Planning Commission's benefit.
All right, this is Pat. Thank you, Kelly. Yes, Camille.
I'm very interested. It seems like Kelly is in sync very much so with the document that John Driscoll crafted and created. I really think it's a useful piece that highlights where there may be some gaps that need to be filled. But before I say anything else, I would really be very interested to hear from John if there's anything else he would add to this conversation.
No, I think that's, I think we've covered it. And so I don't have much to add. I spent time writing today, so I don't have much to add now verbally. But I think if Kelly's in agreement and other planning commissioners are in agreement, then I think it will be good, and we'll have a consistent set of subtitles. And I agree that not everyone is going to be filled as much as the other ones. And you may, Kelly, think of another name other than existing gaps. In essence, it's a setup, it's a summary of the chapter and a setup for what's coming under the table. So I think that's it. I know I don't have much more to add.
We can come up with it. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, Kelly, go ahead.
This is Kelly. Yeah, we can see if there's a better title for that will kind of bridge the different chapters more appropriately.
Great, thanks. Go ahead, Camille.
If I could take it from that 40,000 feet, which honestly, I am so delighted that's where we're at today. If I could bring it down to say 25,000, I do have a couple questions for all of commission that I would like feedback on it, as well as Kelly's opinion. But the history of, many members of Planning Commission know this, the history of our infrastructure repair, maintenance, replacement for water lines, sewer lines, and road surfaceways has not been strong. For 30 years, we really did not attend to it. And at most, we budgeted $50,000 a year for that. And I see that the infrastructure is in the community facilities chapter, but it seems to kind of be there weighted with the same as everything else. And it may be my own bias, but I think given the importance and what it means for the budget for Lexington, and what it means for economic development and quality of life, it could be a standalone chapter, not a long one, not a big one, but I think lifting it out would be useful. John and I had this conversation earlier. John's done some research to see what other localities have done in terms of where that lies. And so if he wants to speak to that, I'm happy to listen to him.
This is Pat. Thanks, Camille. John, were you about to say something or?
Short. I agree with Camille on the need for the emphasis on the infrastructure. Whether or not it stands on its own or it's incorporated into the community facilities. I mean, when we started this, I thought putting infrastructure under community facilities was a bit odd, but that's the way it was in the last comp plan. And I think other chapters, when I've looked, other comp plans, when I've looked at, they integrated them. So I think it's more, I think for me, what's important about Camille's point is the emphasis of the infrastructure more than its placement.
And this is Kelly. That was going to be my suggestion as well, is to emphasize, we could even kind of elevate it in where it is in the chapter. And if there's any addition, let me step back and say that another place where the emphasis will come is through your implementation matrix, which you have not seen, but that will be where all of the strategies are compiled into a single document and then prioritized. And so that as that short-term priority, that's going to be a large budget, is kind of how you can also show the emphasis as well, is through that implementation section. But again, I think the way that we've set this up with the different strategies tied to values, it might be fairly repetitive to have infrastructure called out as a separate chapter. We can also, if you would like, change the title of the chapter to be Community Facilities and Infrastructure. But when it comes to layout and design, sometimes the more streamlined is a little bit easier to swallow and work around for design elements.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Camille?
I like the name change, Kelly, because I do think that elevates it.
Yeah.
And that's useful. There are only two more points that I have that I'd like to put in front of commission.
Camille, if I might interrupt, I just wondered, would anyone else like to weigh in on that particular question that we were just talking about, then the emphasis on it and the name change?
I would just like to add, I like the idea of the, can you hear me now? Was having
Yes, Leslie, we can hear you great.
I'm sorry. I like the idea of changing the title. I think otherwise the chapter reads really well, and I don't know that I would change anything else about it.
Thanks, Leslie.
I have a question.
Yeah, Matt?
Kelly had talked about elevating it. If somebody hadn't come up with this idea of changing the title, how would you have recommended elevating it in terms of this document?
This is Kelly.
First of all, I support the name change, but I'm just curious, is there something else that you were thinking?
The other way that I would suggest that, in addition to the implementation, as I had mentioned, would be through just slightly emphasizing in the text what a commitment this would be, and a policy decision and a critical need in the community.
Great, thanks. Any other comments on that matter? All right, so Camille, you said you wanted to raise another topic?
I have two more. This one, and it could just be my own bias. The Rockledge Regional Jail is going to be a very significant issue for us going forward. It was built with capacity. It was built with that capacity with the potential to be doubled, and now we've more than doubled that capacity. We are sending area inmates out to other facilities, and we're paying prices to other facilities to house those inmates. We have overcrowding here, and we're not done with populating the jail. We know that Buena Vista is not going to be anytime soon in a position to make a contribution to an expansion of the jail. I think that replacing the jail is cost prohibitive, and I don't know what we're going to do. And I know that council and the other jurisdictions will be looking at this, but I feel that that section may need a little more emphasis given the implications, the cost, all of those factors. And I could have missed it, but I didn't see that in the goals and strategies piece, and I need to go back and look at it. But that is major for us. And there's so many things that are major for us, but this one is going to continue until we really don't have the ability to do anything other than address it full on. And Leslie could probably speak to that better than I can because she's on council and she's hearing the statistics.
Thanks, Camille. Yes, Kelly.
This is Kelly. I just wanted to note that Ms. Miller is correct. I did expand the discussion in the planning context portion of the document on jails, but we did not add a strategy. That was one of the items that I wanted to bring up in the community facilities discussion, was if the planning commission wanted to take a policy stand, or if there would be a strategy that would be needed to be added.
I think it'd be good to add a strategy to, but at this point, I think it's more of a study and investigation on how to proceed with the jail.
Thanks, Leslie.
Does the county have a new strategy in their new comprehensive plan? Did they address this at all? Because presumably we should be in line with what they're saying, because ultimately it's going to be a joint venture, I expect.
This is Pat. Thanks, Matt. That's a good question. I see Arnie looking around to see if he can find an answer on a bookshelf behind him. I guess that's something we could look into and get back to that. And then maybe Kelly, you and your folks can work on drafting a type of the language for a strategy of the, as Leslie said, a study and investigate sort of thing.
Yes, we will note that we will look at Rockledge County's comprehensive plan to see what they have to say, and if and then make sure that we align a strategy to that.
Good. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? Does that sound good to you, Camille, from what you were thinking and raising the question?
My last one of the notes that I have written that I want to bring up, the rest of it I trust from listening to Kelly, that the other notes I said will be addressed. But I did break out laughing today, and my sympathy went to Kelly when I was reading John's comments versus the comments that I sent, which is where John said he found the cross references very helpful.
Yeah, right.
My comment was, I found the cross references very confusing because I was having trouble holding LEHAC in my head. And I'm thinking, I've read these chapters several times. The normal citizen who's reading this is not going to immediately capture this. So I defer to John's wisdom that there's value in showing that these strategies thread across chapters, but if there's a way to make it so that the casual reader immediately sees where that thread leads, because again, I'm going, I don't even know where this is. And then again, Kelly, I felt very badly because you're getting John's going, it's perfect, and Camille going, it ain't working. So whatever you can do would be fabulous. Thank you.
That was, this is Kelly, that was one of the suggestions that we had received at a previous meeting, because we wanted to show that each strategy, it seems like there's a lot of strategies in this plan. And this is one of the things that I wanted to bring up to you as well as you review the strategies is there anything that is too far out in left field for the scope of this comprehensive plan over the next 10 to 20 years? Or are there things that are too repetitive and make it to be too difficult to digest for the reader, or not possible or feasible for Lexington staff, given resources, to be able to reasonably accomplish? So the cross references do provide value. It's not something that I've seen in a lot of plans, but they provide the value of kind of showing you that there are some strategies that we have included in multiple chapters, and that's been primarily based on direction. A lot of it is related to connectivity and also land use and seeing those interconnected ties. So we wanted to also include it in this draft so that you could see where there were overlaps. If there are strategies that you think aren't appropriate and to have in two places in the plan. This can help. Whether it stays in the final plan is really up to the commission.
Thanks,
Um,
Kelly. John?
I was commenting more on the fact that we have it in there, which I think is important. How we do it may be another question, but I'm just happy that it's in there because it keeps you connected to the other chapters. I think it was when I looked at somebody's recent plan, Stanton or Harrisonburg or someone in the region, at the end of each chapter, they had a little box that said, how this connects to the other chapters. So in some ways that was more of a narrative. So it's easier for people to see. I mean, this one is maybe, to pick up on Camille's point, it might be a bit of a, you have to be more of an expert to keep what is GI, 3.3, oh, it's green infrastructure, and then I go over there. But maybe we can think about how to do it better, but as a baseline, happy to see it in there. And then, so.
Thanks, John. Any other comments on that? Other folks want to, Camille, on the same topic?
It is, which is, to Kelly's point, and that was kind of where on how many strategies do we have? Are there too many, whatever? One of the things I noted in my comments to Kelly and Commission was I would love to see the aggregated version of all of our goals, which you said is going to happen with the implementation chapter. But to see probably the June meetings devoted to really careful review of the goals to ensure they're nested the way that we want, and that they actually set the clear path and direction. That's one of the cats, sorry. Anyway, that I would really welcome that.
Thanks, Camille. So it sounds like we want to somehow, this is Pat, sorry. It sounds like we want to have some way to show the interconnection between chapters, among chapters. And perhaps Kelly and her group can think of alternative ways from what we have there. And when we do step back and look at all the strategies together, as Camille just said, we can make a decision on that, on how we're going to do that. Maybe we'll be streamlining and pruning some and tweaking them, and we can decide then what's the best way to show the connections. Does that sound about right to everybody? Okay, good. So that's good. Thank you. Kelly, were you going to say something?
I was just, this has been a really helpful discussion in terms of the structure. I would hope that we can move and talk through some of the policy changes and suggestions on strategies that were brought up by members of the commission and the public during the in this initial comment period.
Okay, so why don't we do that right now then? That was kind of where you were thinking we should go through kind of a chapter by chapter, take a look. And why don't we do that now? And just get some of these out there. Where would you like to start, Kelly?
Let's go ahead and start with the introduction. There were not very many comments on that. I just want to make sure that the rest of the commission, that we get the guidance on the introduction and buy off. So I have in front of me basically a summary of all the comments that we've received and organized by chapter. So I hope that I can move through this fairly quickly and only stick to that high level policy and structural changes. So as I mentioned early, we will in this introduction, based on John's suggestion, it was actually something that we had been going back and forth with as a group, but wanted to first see what the commission thought, is the idea of adding a background discussion about the community to the introduction section. So we will add that change in your next draft, assuming there's no argument from the rest of the commission on that. The other structural change to this chapter would be that some of the discussion about the planning framework and structure would be moved to chapter 2, where we discuss the planning framework. So essentially, chapter 1 would introduce the community and provide some basic overview of a comprehensive plan, while chapter 2 will be focused on the structure of the plan and continue to provide that description of the planning values that were established by the commission through this process. So those are 2 structural changes that we agreed with John's suggestions on those, but I did want to highlight that for the commission and make sure there were no arguments or differences of opinion on either of those 2 chapters.
Thanks, Kelly. Does anyone want to weigh in on that? If you've had a chance to look at John's comments on that and those things, what do folks think on that? All right. So we'll make those changes. Good.
We will make those changes.
Thanks, Kelly.
So the next chapter that we received comments on and policy changes on was green infrastructure. We received comments from Chris Wise and Betty Bezel, excuse me for my pronunciation on that. So both of these did provide several comments on the chapter. We are generally in agreement on all of these changes. So one of them that I did want to confirm with the commission is that throughout, Chris Wise is suggesting that our references to Shenandoah Valley be changed to Valley of Virginia. And this is one of those things that I've seen it in some of the other narrative about Lexington. I just wanted to confirm that the commission is okay with that change universally.
This is Pat. What do folks think about that terminology?
No, but there are plenty of other places. Tourism uses Shenandoah Valley all the time. I mean, I'm in
John,
I'm fine.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
John had talked about, trying to introduce the kind of narrative or reintroduce or make it a bit more pronounced narrative that involves Native Americans in this area and the origin of Shenandoah. And I like that. I feel like it's in some ways it feels nice to have that kind of connection and the significance of the meaning of the word. So I would not be in favor of going to Valley of Virginia. I feel, unless we're really not in the Shenandoah Valley, which is a different thing, but I kind of like keeping the Shenandoah Valley.
This is Pat. I'm going to make a suggestion. Would it be all right if Chris seems to be logged in here, if we just quickly ask him if his opinion on that? Would that be all right with the commission if he has anything to add on that? Chris, if you're there, if you'd like to expand a little bit on that question.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Just about, yeah.
Okay. The only reason I say that is that, that Shenandoah Valley is obviously, is a sort of a historic and cultural sort of construct, and I understand what Matt's talking about. Obviously, it sounds great, but throughout the narrative, it seems like it's changed from Valley, Virginia. There are 2 references, Valley, Virginia, Shenandoah Valley. So one or the other should be chosen, and from a geological point of view, we are not in the Shenandoah Valley, but a lot of people like to say that. And, but it has really no relationship to reality. It's just sort of a cultural construct.
Thanks, Chris. This is
With that for clarification, I think I don't have a problem moving away from Shenandoah Valley, because if we're not, I was always wondering if we're in the valley, in the Shenandoah Valley, but if it's not accurate, it's a nice word, but it's misleading.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So is everyone else okay with that, making that change? Camille, you have your hand up?
I'm good with Valley of Virginia. I heard somebody once say, we are the front porch that overlooks the gateway to Shenandoah Valley. We're not technically Shenandoah Valley. We like to say it, but we're not. So I think now is a great time to make it accurate.
This is Blake. I notice in the first sentence of the introduction, it says Virginia's Great Valley. Is that the same thing as Valley of Virginia, or?
Chris, you have an opinion on that? He's muted. I don't know, Blake.
This is helpful for me. I'll just say, this is Kelly. This is helpful. I just needed a little further clarification. We'll correct it and kind of make that narrative clear. And that's the most detail oriented of the changes that I just wanted some discussion on and clarification, because no one on our team could seem to figure that one out. So thank you for that.
Okay, thanks. You're gonna go. We'll move on then. Does that sound good, Kelly? What else? Oh, Leslie has her hand up. Yes,
I
Leslie.
wanted to go back actually to chapter 2, and I just wanted to say this graphic you had on there, I thought this was a great graphic, and even if it can be used up front in the plan somewhere around the title as well, but I thought that was a really good summary. I'll just throw that out.
Okay, good. Thanks, Leslie.
We are trying to add more graphics throughout the plan, so you might see even more in the next iteration.
Hey, this is Jamie.
Yeah, Jamie.
Yeah, I echo Leslie's notion. The graphics are awesome. I would just, and this could be a resolution issue, which Kelly referred to previously. I would recommend that to maximize contrast. There was one graphic I remember that was light green with white text. A little bit hard to read, so just throwing that very small note out.
Good. Thanks, Jamie. Okay, good. Thanks, Kelly.
Yes, so I'm just going to continue. I'm still on chapter 4 on green infrastructure. We had the comment received that we should add the tree board and cemetery board under partnerships and initiatives. We have no, we're fine making that change as recommended, but I wanted to make sure the board was fine with that.
This is Pat. Any thoughts on that? Does that sound like a good addition? Okay, sounds good. Heads nodding. Yeah. Okay, good.
We also had the comment that we should add the RAOP to strategy GI 5.1. That's on page green infrastructure 11. Again, no issue with that from our perspective, but I think my goal is that any changes to the strategies I do run by the commission at this point. So that's my purpose here.
Any thoughts on that from anyone?
The RAOP, sorry, is?
Rockledge, this is Jamie. Rockledge Area Outdoor Partnership.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, so that fits perfect with that. You said GI 5.1, identify and collaborate with local organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion.
Jamie, I agree.
Okay, good.
Ms. Miller had also suggested that GI 1.6 may need to be deleted based on past discussions. There was a lot of changes to the green infrastructure strategies. We had a lot of changes to the strategies during that discussion, and we received follow-up recommendations from the community that we tried to incorporate and integrate. So I would like the commission to weigh in on whether GI 1.6 is still needed. And
I thought that was the one. I thought that the way it's written there was what we finally came up with, was combining a couple of things. I would say yes, keep it.
I would agree. I remember we had lots of discussion about that, and I think you've captured it.
Birds and the bees. Any other thoughts on that, anyone? So it sounds like we'll keep that as is.
The question that I had on green infrastructure for the commission is also, if you'll give me a moment, I need to find. Basically, since we now have this green infrastructure concept map, this is something that I wanted to point out for the Planning Commission. If you haven't had a chance to look at this, this is a new map where we have attempted to incorporate some of the suggestions from the community on integrated connections, mapping the existing green infrastructure assets, and then how those tie together. So please, if you have any comments on that map, I just wanted to point that out as a big change. And in doing so, in providing that map, we really are setting the stage for some of the strategies that are in here regarding the identification of green infrastructure assets. They're not, you know, for instance, GI 3.1, we were able to modify that, which says identify green infrastructure site needs and opportunities in developing a plan for improving existing sites and creating new site linkages. We're basically setting the stage with that through this concept map on page GI-9. So just wanted to point that out to the commission.
Great, thank you. All right. Any thoughts on that, or we move on? Okay. Kelly?
So the next chapter that we had received comments on was economy. I think
Sorry, Kelly, just to interrupt, or
John. Yeah.
Just you saw my point on flooding under climate change.
Yes, there were some other comments that we received on the green infrastructure chapter, but generally they were editorial, and so I felt comfortable with some of those changes.
Okay.
May I say some?
Yes,
I noticed that Betty Beazle from the tree board, I'm also on the tree board, had made a comment, and you had mentioned that, Kelly?
Yes, so that comment was that to note the Brushy Hills city property, that is listed on the green infrastructure assets map, but our proposed suggestion to that is to basically add a footnote to that map to provide a little more context to what that site actually is, and that it is city owned and it is an asset.
Does that sound good to you, Chris?
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Thanks, Kelly.
And then actually, I am going to jump back to another comment that Chris had provided, which was that they're under GI 3-3, that there is already a tree planting program, and perhaps, and I'm kind of reading into this comment, but perhaps we don't actually need GI 3.3. Let me see what that one is for the commission, for the record. Establish a tree planting program to increase tree canopy on city property and rights of way. If that's already a program that the city has, perhaps we don't need to include it, or perhaps we just need to change establish to continue.
This is John, I would recommend that change, Kelly, because either maintain or continue.
Yeah. That's probably the best way to go.
So we'll change establish to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
Good, thanks, okay.
Okay. Let me just see if there was anything in the changes that we had for economy. I think most of these were pretty minor changes to the economy chapter. The main structural changes here were to add information on the hub zone and different tax incentives that are available to incentivize development and job creation, and to remove some of the contextual or data heavy statistical information on the demographics, and kind of move that out to an appendix and just provide a summary of that. So the main comment to strategies on this, there was two. One was, should we add an action on the different tax incentives, both federal and local, primarily federal here, for related to hub zone, job tax credits, and opportunity zones? Should we have a strategy related to this? There's probably not a lot that the community can actually do related to these incentives. It would primarily be to promote these incentives, for instance, on the city's economic development page on the website, is just to note that those would be there. So it would become more of an educational component. So that was the main comment of a potential what's missing to the economy chapter.
Kelly, was the suggestion to move some of these tables out of the economy chapter? Or was there a specific table? Because I think in general, the tables are pretty good.
No, so I'm sorry, that discussion, so we had moved some of the tables out between the last draft of the economy chapter to this draft. No one suggested that any of those tables be removed. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Leslie.
Is anyone for or against a strategy of promoting these incentives that are listed in the plan?
John?
Well, I'm for it. If it's something, if it's a program that, the question I had is who actually does the hub zone and the tax credit and the opportunity zone. So it may be a matter of education, Kelly, more than, because we have it in here. So then there's the so what question. And I think if we can clarify or say, well, who takes advantage of those and how is it done? It would be good to know.
And some of that, one of the strategies is to consider a economic development professional. I think we might have softened that a little bit. But some of that would be one of their roles, is that they could go out and actively market. But if you don't have a staff person devoted to that, it's unlikely to be an actionable strategy.
This is John. I agree with you. I had the same thought process. I looked at that item about hiring someone, and given the current context, I don't think that'll be happening anytime soon. So then that's why I was thinking, well, maybe then those need to come in somehow, just to say, look at them or follow them or educate about them, who benefits, who implements. That's all. Just.
Yeah, I know Main Street is promoting or advertising about the credits. And I would still leave in the economic development person. That's in the city council strategic plan as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I agree, Leslie. I wasn't saying that it won't happen. I'm just saying it's
not going to happen soon.
So we could add that as a strategy to promote that, and then the responsibility would be an economic development person, and it's almost setting breadcrumbs for them if you're able to hire them in the future, and at least kind of start to establish what that role would be, one of the responsibilities of that role. That would be more of a long-term action.
This is Pat. So that sounds like the way we want to go with that, and try to make that.
When you say long-term action, does that mean that up until the point where we review the comprehensive plan is reviewed and updated, or do you mean that we say this is a 10-year window that you have to, it's open during that time, you need to pass through it? I mean, what does that mean long-term?
So in the implementation matrix, we had this discussion, and I don't have it open, but we in one of our early discussions about the governance chapter, we had made decisions on what each of those categories would be. I think we had just short-term, long-term, and ongoing, and we defined those. So I'll have to go back to those notes.
Okay.
Thanks, Pat.
The other strategy that we received a suggestion about for economy was 5.4. And the suggestion was from Ms. Miller that this strategy be deleted, just because we don't have authority over this area. The strategy is to partner with the high school on early education workforce program and health services.
Yeah, no, I would keep that. I mean, I think we have that in our strategic plan as well, but maybe it's partner with Rockledge County High School and Dabney.
Yes, that looks like a editorial issue.
Yeah, but no, like I said, that's in our strategic plan as well. So I don't see why we'd take it out.
Thanks, Leslie. Camille, did you want to weigh in?
I do. I think the way it's currently worded doesn't seem to capture that Dabney Lancaster has a pretty ambitious program for workforce development. And the goal as it's currently stated doesn't include Valley Workforce, which is actually our representative in workforce development. And so we're missing that piece. And to Leslie's point, you can put in collaborate with the high school or collaborate with career and technical education at the high school. But I think wording it to reflect the reality, which is we don't have authority with the high school. There are other entities actively involved. And it's almost like making a goal that's already being done.
Yeah, thanks, Camille. This is Pat again. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Camille. A lot of those things are in place, and if we're going to leave it in, I think changing it to support, lend assistance. I mean, I don't know what ways we would think of that the city is going to contribute to that, which is already going on, as Camille said. I mean, it is a big thrust at the high school right now. So I don't know if there's a way we want to word it to show that's an important thing, and anything we can do as a city to support that, we'll try to do. So would it be a good, just a question of tweaking the language, I think as Kelly said, and making it more that we're going to support in any way we can.
Hey, this is Jamie.
Yes.
If Daphne's in there, I would propose we might as well throw W&L in there. This could be ambitious, but with their entrepreneurship program and that kind of stuff continuing to gain traction, there's no reason to say that we can't convince some of these folks from W&L to set up shop in Lexington. I know, I see Leslie smiling. I know that's ambitious, but I don't think.
I think that's good. Yeah, I think that's a little going in a different direction than what the intent of this is. This is more basic workforce development was what. Yeah, I don't know that we're ready for. I don't know that W&L's ready to be at that level.
That's no problem. This is Jamie. Cool. That's no problem with me. I just wanted to point that out.
Thanks, Jamie.
Pat, hey, this is Drew. Kelly, maybe we just want to say encourage and continue working or partnering with Rockledge County High School.
Thank you. So overall, it did sound like we will keep that strategy with some minor modifications. So that's all that I had as major kind of strategy policy changes to the economy chapter. We did receive the other comments and we'll incorporate them as suggested. The next chapter that we have is arts and culture. And the only major policy question that I had for you all today on this chapter was related to the inclusion of private businesses on the arts and culture asset map. And this might seem like a minor question, but the reason why I wanted to bring it up today is we're in agreement on this, but this list was provided to us from the Arts and Culture Working Group. And so generally in the comprehensive plan, we don't list private businesses for the very reasons that Ms. Miller had noted, but I was hesitant to make that change, at least in this draft, on that initial draft, based on the fact that the working group had identified those. So I wanted to leave that as a discussion for the commission.
Camille, would you like to weigh in?
I do. I appreciate the fact you were being sensitive to those in the community who were part of the conversation. But I think it's incumbent upon Planning Commission to try to ensure that the comprehensive plan is as solid as possible. And quite honestly, if we get to September with any easing of the pandemic, that map is already going to be out of date. So I really do feel strongly that we take the private sector businesses off of that. And if in the text you want to just mention, we're fortunate to have a number of businesses that support arts and culture through music, various media, whatever, without naming them, fabulous.
Hey, this is Jamie. I agree with Camille. Just a blanket statement about the private businesses would be sufficient given the fluidity of the situation. But another note, I would argue that some of these nonprofits that are listed are no more or less vulnerable to change than any of these for-profits. Not to call anybody out, but there's folks on that list that if we're not going to count on a for-profit business, there's no reason to count on a nonprofit one either. So perhaps some other blanket statement can be contrived for them, folks like Lime Kiln, Rockledge Ballet, Hailstone, etc.
To say, when I looked at this and saw the map, I loved that. I thought, even if it does have private businesses on it and it's might change, it gives you an idea of how many cultural arts and culture assets do we have in the community. I mean, I'd be in favor of just leaving it as is.
This is Pat. One thing I might say about the difference in connection to what Jamie brought up was that the businesses, they're supporting arts, music, and so forth, but that's not their main reason for existence. Whereas the community, how are they framed? The community-based organization and initiative, that those things are their reasons for existing. And so I think that's why those probably should stay. Yes, they could come and go, and there's always new ones, and ones might not last, but that's their reason for existence as opposed to businesses who do this part. So while I see we maybe more leaving out the business and having, as Neil said, a statement that we have a lot of businesses who do things to support, but I think the other organizations probably should stay. That's my opinion. What other folks think?
Hey, this is Jamie. That's a good point, Pat.
Would you leave Washington and Lee and VMI in, take out the businesses, but leave those in, and then the nonprofits? Just take out the businesses, but except for VMI and WNL?
I would, this is John, I would go with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, this is Jamie. One thing I would add to existing regional assets would be Glen Murray Park.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, Jamie.
Which is for the Berkeley folks, that's located in Buena Vista.
Okay.
And they have, they have the music festivals and so forth. So that's a good thing.
So,
well, was one of the ideas though just to have an appendix at the very end? Sorry, this is Blake. Just having a table in the back, like see reference to existing resources in 2020. I don't know. I guess the arts and culture chapter that touches on where music is performed, where art is displayed, That just seems to me like the whole point of the chapter is literally just an inventory, and it's very fluid and dynamic and everything. But would just a table appendix at the end be a nice sort of nod to businesses that have chosen to choose Lexington?
What if I'm
I'm sorry, this is Matt. My concern is along the lines, I think that Camille said, is that we don't want to create a document that becomes outdated in 4 months because of the massive transformation of the economy that we're experiencing right now. And then to keep up with that, trying to maintain that is difficult. I love the fact that we're putting all these businesses down that are very supportive of the arts. I just don't know how to deal with it properly that allows for the evolution of the economy.
This is Kelly. I guess one question that I have is, for instance, if each of these places, these private businesses, there's 7 that are listed in Lexington, and then there's a few breweries and cideries and regional assets. If these all have a stage, for instance, but we could star them, or similar to what we did in the green infrastructure map, with just a lighter color or a smaller dot indicating best management practices. In this chapter, we could just have a slightly smaller, or legend item that would say private business or restaurant that's supportive of the arts, or something like that, so that we're not actually naming them, but if they have a stage that's unlikely to go away, that might be an option. Because the problem with having the names change, I mean, you change an ownership and they change the title of the restaurant, and then it's dated. But you could highlight it on the location on the map without having the actual title of the restaurant there.
Hey, this is Jamie. Most of these places listed do not actually have a stage. So there is no actually infrastructure there.
Okay.
But that's just a small note. The other observation would be, it seems like, if I recall correctly, the arts and culture group, we were mostly thinking along the lines of live performance, but that's just one type of art. So if we're going to include Palms and Pier East, for example, what about all the art galleries?
good point.
I'm trying to.
I'm sorry, John. John, can I interrupt for a second, please?
Absolutely.
Camille had her hand up before. Did you want to add in on there, Camille?
Thank you. Very briefly, I think there are 2 things that might be happening here. One that concerns me is the list as it currently appears is current, but it's incomplete. In 4 months, that list is going to be inaccurate and incomplete. But there may be a way, instead of listing the individual businesses, is to talk about how there are moments in time when enough like-oriented businesses cluster together to actually change the dynamic of that area. And a good area for that would be on Washington Street. The block between Main and Jefferson is sort of an arts district now, and it has that annual festival that highlights that. Or you look at McLaughlin Street. And so talking about the dynamic without listing the individual pieces. Because if we're going to list them, then I think we need to be very comprehensive, thoughtful, and not overlook anyone.
Yes, Kelly.
I'm going to look to Catherine to weigh in on this, because she's my mapping person. But maybe instead of listing private businesses, we do some kind of overlay or cross-hatching that says exactly what Camille just noted, that there's kind of a arts-centered area with several private business or multiple private businesses in the area that contribute to arts.
Yeah, this is Catherine. I was going to weigh in and say that just that. I think, Leslie said she saw this and she liked it immediately because she loves seeing that all these businesses and these places are located in Lexington. So in that regard, it's functioning more as a heat map, where we're saying this is where the activity is. This is where the arts and culture activity is. So maybe we can translate this from just a point-centered map to more of a heat map. So this is where the concentration of arts and culture is occurring within the city of Lexington.
Good solution.
So if this is Pat, if we think in terms of, as Camille said, that it might be incomplete, send along any of the names of places, galleries, whatever that would contribute to that, so we can get the best possible picture. And then Catherine will work with that, and we'll take a look at it next time.
Okay, great.
Sound good to everybody?
I'm a big fan of this notion of the heat map, where you're defining a concentration of support as opposed to identifying individual locations. I'm curious to see how that works out.
Yeah,
Thanks, Matt.
John, I think that's a great idea, because I think listing the individual private restaurants, we haven't even agreed what the criteria is for including them. Is it that, as Kelly said, they have a stage, or I know some of them put up photographs, put art on the wall. So we're not exactly clear ourselves why we have them in there, but the larger point is that we do have these venues that are part of our arts and culture. So that heat map's a great idea.
Good. And again, be sure, this is Pat, be sure to pass along any ones we might have missed to them. Thanks. Okay, Kelly?
Yes. Yes, thank you. So that was, I know that we didn't want to go chapter by chapter, or there was some concern about that, but we are now moving on to housing. And there's just a handful of items under housing. So we're moving well through the agenda.
Kelly, can I interrupt you for 1 second, please?
Sure.
I'm just looking at the clock and I'm thinking about timing. We're going to want to have public comment, and we also have the last item on the agenda. I'm wondering how long that might take us. We're talking about the public review, discussion of how we're going to have public review.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if maybe we might want to not get into the housing chapter right now.
Okay.
Is that because I think we might end up running out of time on that and the other matters. And Jamie and Blake, I think, will be talking about the last item on the agenda, if I'm not mistaken. But does that sound okay to everybody? Do we think we will be, because I think we talked a good bit about the community facilities chapter, actually, which wasn't on our docket for this, if I'm not mistaken.
What would there are a couple issues on the housing I wanted to talk about. So would we just push off to the next meeting, or?
Yeah. I'm actually going to suggest that now, because there are things that I'm afraid that we don't want to give it short shrift, and we do have one more fairly significant item on the agenda tonight to talk about, I think. And as I said, we have already talked a good bit about the chapter on community facilities, I think, which was not on our list of things to talk about tonight. So I think we might have time in our next meeting, if that sounds all right to people. Or am I off base here? I don't want to waste time talking about what we're going to talk about. So is anyone agreeing with me that yes, we can put off the topic of the housing chapter right now? Okay, then that's what we're going to do. Nobody commenting one way, yes or no?
Good job, Pat.
That's what we're going to. So Kelly, I'm sorry to cut you off on that, but I think we're going to put that off till next. Camille?
If we're going to be hearing from Jamie and Blake, I need to make the observation. I'm having a lot of trouble hearing Jamie's audio, and I may be the only one, but I hear everybody else clearly, and I'm not hearing him. And my concern is what he and Blake are about to share is really important, and I don't want to miss it.
Thank you. Okay, so what we will do now, though, we are going to open up for public comment on what we have just been talking about. And we have a few folks in attendance. If they're interested in commenting, they can unmute and identify themselves. All right, then we will close that, and then I think we're going to wind up this agenda item, if that's all right with everybody. Okay, good, thanks. So let's move on to the item D on our agenda under new business, which is talking about the public review of the comprehensive plan. And we have staff report or staff comment. Is that going to be you, Arnie, or are Jamie and Blake going to talk? Okay, so Jamie, Blake.
Go for it, Blake.
Okay. Yeah, so last week we spoke with Drew and Kelly and I think Jonathan, just sort of trying to figure out the technologies available, what would be the best format and platform to present the virtual forum. And I think there was a unanimous consensus to stick with Zoom as the preferred platform. It's working well for other city functions. So there's just a couple sort of technical details that could potentially be worked out, such as who wants to be the official host, Zoom host of the meeting, if it's going to be the city's Zoom, or if it's going to be Berkeley Group. I think that there's going to be a way to, no matter who hosts it, that people on the city staff and also city planning commissioners and Berkeley Group can all have a chance to speak and sort of have stake in the meeting if needed. There's going to likely need to be a moderator that will sort of manage any sort of chat functionality that is going to field questions, so that if somebody is presenting, they don't have to simultaneously be worrying about their presentation and also addressing questions. The meeting will likely probably need to be streamed, and I know that the city has a way to do that. There's going to be also a way with Zoom you can have the meeting recorded so that it could be viewed later on, and so that could be posted publicly if people can't attend. One other thing that we sort of the format of what the Berkeley Group has intended would be to have about roughly an hour presentation by the Berkeley Group introducing the plan, the process, everything that's which includes a brief introduction. The presentation itself would be about 30 minutes, would be a sort of an overview of the visions, goals, strategies, and sort of like a bird's eye high level picture of the plan. And then that would be followed up with a Q&A session, which is sort of slotted for about 20 minutes, which could then be, that's sort of where we're going to get into needing a moderator to field questions that are received in the chat functionality through Zoom. It seems like utilizing Zoom's chat feature would probably be the most logical way to field questions, so that there isn't too many people trying to speak at once. What else am I missing here? And then there is a couple questions that we may need to sort of figure out as planning commission or the city, is how we want to have more engagement with the public. If we want to sort of have polling in the meeting, if we can use Zoom's features to poll or sort of ask questions that people can interact with in real time. Also, maybe providing an exit survey either through Zoom or through another platform after the meeting is presented, so we can get more feedback. So that's sort of a question that's up in the air we can discuss. And then ultimately, we would need to nail down a date for having this. Berkeley Group has suggested the week of June 15th, and the specific time and day would be to be determined by us. But our goal is that we would be able to get feedback and results by the June 25th Planning Commission meeting. Yeah, so that about summarizes a lot of what we talked about. I think so ultimately what Planning Commission should probably decide is when we want to have this. I think we're on schedule to have it for the probably the second week of June, because by the end of the May meeting, Planning Commission will have sort of covered most of the overview draft of the comp plan, and that should give the city enough time to advertise the meeting and publicize it and get the draft out to the people that want to read it. I did have one question for the Berkeley group. They sent me sort of draft minutes of our meeting, and I had sort of wondered about how we were going to handle who would be able to attend the meeting, if it was going to be a public free-for-all or if it would be sort of request an invitation, sort of like this. And I think Berkeley group, you guys said that that it would be it would follow city protocols, which participants would need to pre-register with the planning department in order to get an invitation. And I just want clarification on that.
So this is Kelly speaking. Drew, do you want to take that one though?
Well, I can just jump in real quick, and I want to make just a couple of points. Typically we would not do a public meeting this way. This is not how we typically would do it. We'd want to be at the community, having people come in an open house forum where they're looking at maps and we're having engaged discussion with citizens on a one-to-one basis. And so we're doing this because we're trying to wrap up the draft to coincide with the end of the fiscal year, which is at the end of June. And given the situation that we're in right now, we feel that this is the best way that we can get engagement. And we may end up getting engagement from folks and participation from folks who traditionally would not normally be engaged in the process. So, there are some potential upsides to it as well. So I just wanted to make that point. It's certainly not the way we typically do it, but it's something that we're open to exploring. We also want it to be as inclusive as we can, but we feel like it's important to follow the city's policies and procedures that they already have in place. And in talking with Arnie, that is really the process and protocols and procedures that the city has for all of their public meetings at this point in time. And Arnie, if you want to speak to that, you can. But we want to make sure we are coinciding whatever we're doing for this public forum that the city would be doing for any other of its public meetings that they're trying to get public participation from.
Yeah, this is Arnie. If I could just chime in quickly. Our IT department does not want to make our login for Zoom publicized widely because other jurisdictions have had their Zoom meetings hijacked in those cases. So it will be more cumbersome for folks to have to call us and register to be able to receive a Zoom meeting invite for this forum, but that is the way our IT department wants to handle it this time.
I'll just add two things onto that, is that by making the draft available in advance, we can provide information on how people can provide questions that may not be able to participate in the Zoom meeting or register in advance, but they could provide questions to the Berkeley group or city staff in advance of the meeting that they would want to be read into the record, and then we could respond that way. That would be one option. And then kind of as the follow-on for people, again, that aren't able to participate perhaps in the Zoom meeting, but do wish to watch live on Facebook or to just watch on after the fact on Facebook, is that we can, that's kind of where that idea of an exit survey could come in. So we can, it may be very short. It might just be, rank how you feel about the comp plan, or perhaps, we'll frame some questions if that's the route that the commission would like to go. But the exit survey would allow us to immediately get feedback from those that participate in the Zoom call. And then we could also kind of make that more widely available through a link on the city's website and keep it open for a week, say, after the meeting, and or a weekend, even if we want to keep it shorter. But to allow that opportunity to weigh in via the survey, since people cannot converse as easily in this format.
Can I, Pat, this is John, a question. Thank you for all of that. I just want to clarify that the meeting we're discussing now is the substitute for the public meeting where we're going to present the plan. It's not the formal public hearing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Yeah. Well, then I think, we're doing the best under the circumstances. And also, the point that you've been making, Kelly, and others, if the draft is available in advance, I think we can also do our own part as commissioners and others to push it out to people that we know would want to give comments to it. And I think, I think we can do some of that pushing ourselves to ask groups, even the groups that we list in the partnerships under each of the chapters, please take a look at the comp plan, and in particular this chapter, which we know you have a stake in, and provide comments. So we might have to be a bit more proactive than just putting a public notice in the paper, but actually send out some messages to some of those key players and say, you're welcome to, we look forward to your comments and participation.
Thanks, John. This is Pat. Yeah, and I think we, that Arnie, that you all have had the list of people who you've been communicating with each step of the way, right? And so maybe it's just a question of making sure we have everybody on there that will have a stake in it. So that should be done, I would imagine, right?
May I ask you a question?
Yeah, good, Matt. Go ahead.
This is Matt. Arnie or people from the Berkeley group, is there any sense, based on your experience with public meetings up to this point, if certain parts of the population are not being reached? For example, there could be an age issue, people not being comfortable with Zoom or familiar with Zoom. There could be a technology issue. I don't know if you see any trends, if the participation is essentially different when you do this format, when you do this approach, or that we need to deal with, or is it pretty consistent with what you had before?
This is Drew, we're in uncharted territory ourselves because we've not done this before either. So, honestly, we don't have any data to say one way or the other. Obviously there are, I think that for communities that wouldn't historically be very well connected, if we were in a rural community, I would say this probably was not the best means to try to get the end goal that we're looking for. But Lexington being an urban area and having access to the internet, I think that it's situated and set up in a way that can make it as successful as it can be given the times that we're in. So I don't know that answers your question. Kelly, you have anything to add to that?
That does.
Thanks, Drew. Yeah. I mean, I think it is just going to be a question of, as John said, doing as much outreach as we can to the groups that have been interested in, who should be, and so forth, and making sure it's out there.
Yeah, this is Blake.
Blake.
I would just agree with everything that's been said, and that it will definitely capture a different demographic of people than a normal in-person meeting. I think Zoom will deter some people, and but I think one positive though is that if this meeting can be recorded, it can always be viewed asynchronously. So somebody doesn't have to be tuned into Facebook, and they don't have to if they want. And so, but it would require computer access, and also somebody can always listen in through their telephone. There's a number to call to come in to join a Zoom meeting that would be audio only, but it would still be something if they wanted to at least hear the audio part.
Hey, this is Jamie. I totally agree with Blake, and I would just add that for any folks who may view Zoom or computer access as a barrier, there's innumerable other folks that view the geo-agnostic component of this as a plus. So there's no reason to assume that it would just be a negative. It could be a positive. And also these demographic assumptions are only assumptions.
Yeah, I will say our experience from city council is we're getting more views and participation, having it live streamed and available for watching on Facebook. So I think this is a much better format. We'll get more participation.
Thanks, Leslie.
My question was sincere. I wasn't suggesting one thing or the other, or I was really just curious. And I think that a number of you have responded that both is the best we can. And in fact, in some ways you actually see increased participation. I think that's right. So that's great. I'm fine with that.
Thanks, Matt. Okay. Is there anything else we need to put out there on that? Jamie, Blake, anybody else?
No, so this is just the discussion portion where we should probably just confirm with Berkeley Group maybe the timing, or if we can't confirm today, we should maybe have a planning commissioner sort of doodle poll of when we want to have it that week of June 15th, trying to capture the best possible time that, yeah, you know, for most people. So I don't know if we want to have that discussion right now or have it electronically after this meeting.
Berkeley Group, this is Pat. Berkeley Group, do you have a suggestion or a preference from your point of view?
Well, this is Drew. Our preference would certainly be to have as much time to plan for it as we possibly can. But, you know, we want to stay away from days where there may be some other meetings that are going on. I think that maybe that Thursday is a council meeting day, if I'm remembering correctly. And if there are any other community events going on that week, we would want to try to be mindful of that, understanding that there's not probably a lot of events going on quite yet, but we just want to be mindful of any other conflicts so that we can get as much participation as we can.
Thanks, Blake. I mean, I'm sorry, Camille, I see your hand.
Yeah, I think this sounds like a really good plan. It's well thought out and I'm behind it 100%. The only thing I would say when I have to discuss this today is my concern is that this doesn't leave us time to talk about the aggregated goals as a commission before they go to the community. I don't know that there's a resolution for that, but I would be very sorry for us not to have that opportunity. That said, you've got to keep moving forward with the plan and get the community involvement. So I don't know the answer.
Does anybody know the answer? Well, I think we're going to get as much done in our next meeting as we can, and I think we're going to put out what we have at that point as best we can beforehand, and do our best in the time frame we have. But I think we need to get it done. That's kind of the feeling, right? That we need to get something going in June. Yeah. So, is there a thought on the particular day, Matt?
Two things. Are doodle polls allowed legally, Arnie? And then also, I think with Camille, I think we may find that as a result of this meeting, we arrive at a more distilled form of exactly what you're trying to have presented to us in advance. So, but I'm wondering, are doodle polls allowed in terms of scheduling?
That was, I mean, I was just a suggestion of just a mechanism to find a common time, but I don't want to step on the city's, policies and procedures.
Yeah,
Sorry.
maybe fine. I just don't know.
Arnie?
Right, this is Arnie. I don't have a problem with the doodle poll. That's not substantive. That's just picking a date. So that would be fine amongst the planning commission to send that out to pick potentially a better date.
Does anyone have an idea of a date that would be good for any particular reason? John, your hand is up.
Yeah, this is John. Just backing up. Blake mentioned that the meeting of the 25th, the Planning Commission meeting of June 25, is where we would have a consolidated final version with comments incorporated. So to give the Berkeley group time to do that, there's not a whole lot of time between the 15th and the 25th. And the 15th is a Monday.
If I may, John,
Yeah.
and Mr. Bradley, the goal is that we would be able to have and consolidate comments that were received from the public to be able to discuss on June 25th, so that we can, if there are major policy changes resulting from that community meeting, we want to make sure that the Planning Commission has the opportunity to review that and with us as well.
So I guess my question is, what do you as a group feel that you need? How much time do you need to do that, Kelly? If you have the meeting the week of the 15th, which is a Monday, and as Drew said, Thursday the 18th doesn't work because that's city council night. So that leaves you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday. Friday's not necessarily a good day. So now you're down to Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. I'm just trying to help because sometimes doodle polls go around and around.
Can we just,
if you do it on Monday, it gives you the weekend to finish all the presentations. Sorry about that. I know how it works.
why don't we just put Tuesday out there and see, this is Pat, I mean, would Tuesday work? Tuesday the 16th, would that work?
Yep.
Yes.
That's it, yeah, okay.
Good.
No one's saying that idea? Okay, so why don't we just set it for Tuesday, June 16th?
And then a time.
Oh, and a time. Yeah, what would be a good time to have people tune in? Is 5 too early? Before dinner, after dinner? What are your thoughts, folks? Camille? Camille, you're on mute. You're muted, Camille. You're muted.
5 probably works because I don't know that we're going to be back to the standard work week. So I think 5 is a great time.
Thoughts? Sounds good to me. Anybody else? All right.
Sounds good.
This is Pat saying everyone sounds like they're okay with 5 o'clock Tuesday the 16th. And we will be having a meeting. We've got our meeting this month of the 28th and the week before. So if any details need to be ironed out, we'll have time to do that, right? Okay. Great.
And I guess we're just to add one question about, we're assuming it won't go longer than 2 hours. Is that a realistic time frame? Okay. Then 5 o'clock's
Yeah,
good.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, the goal was for the actual Berkeley group presentation part was ambitiously to have it within an hour, but it will probably go over if there's questions and a lot of comments. But I think that the way Kelly and Drew envision it, it would be a straightforward their presentation would all be done at once. There won't be too many interjections and questions and comments in the middle of the presentation so that things get derailed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we kind of, this is Drew, we kind of think that people's attention spans on Zoom is probably not what it would be if we were, at the cafeteria, school cafeteria looking at maps. So, we'll try to keep it as short as we can. If people want to talk, we'll stick around as long as people want to. And there are questions that people have. So we're not on a time constraint, but we understand. We would be shooting to be done about an hour is probably, hour and a half would be the most we'd probably be looking to have it last.
At this point, would it be okay at this point if I open up the public comment for those who may want to who have stuck around?
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
Of Berkeley Group. Have you guys, because this is a big document with lots of chapters, we had discussed having various commission members be responsible for collecting questions and responding to inquiries for different chapters and such. We can do that through the Zoom after the presentation by having these breakout rooms in Zoom, but that may be too complicated. But that also may be able to satisfy an issue that is, how do we manage 30 questions all on different parts of the comprehensive plan and keep everybody's attention when somebody's just interested, for example, on the historic or the economy or housing. Have you guys ever played with that before?
No, no.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a feature. I do think it would be, I think it would be hard to facilitate, honestly, and I don't know how live recordings of breakout rooms works.
Yeah.
We had talked about that as well internally and kind of came to the conclusion that it's more important for everyone to be able to participate rather than feeling like they were put into a breakout room and not able to participate on perhaps other chapters or with the entire group and what they might be missing. Drew, you wanted to say something too?
Well, when we normally do this in person, we have folks that are walking around the room and they'll be talking to one person and say, oh, I've got a question about the transportation project. But then they're talking to that person and say, oh, what about this thing with Parks and Rec? And then you're running to find somebody else. And we just don't think it would work as well. And like Kelly said, everybody should be hearing the same types of things. And we don't know what we're going to get. We're kind of experimenting. We're in new uncharted territory. So I think we'll have some lessons learned, but I think we'll do the best we can.
John?
General question to all of us. What is it that we want to get out of this? Because if you make the presentation and then we have a half hour, 45 minutes, I'm assuming we want to hear as much as we can from others other than us. I mean, it's trying to find out what, people who are interested and who have comments to make, we give them ample time and room to make those. It's less about members of the Planning Commission in this format having much of a role, I think.
Right. This is Pat. That's my sense, that we're there to listen, I think, and gather. That's my sense. Camille, did your hand up?
I do. To John's point, the two major things that I would like to get out of this is, one, to know that the public had an opportunity to hear essentially an overview of the comp plan. The second one that matters to me greatly is, in the public's mind, individually or collectively, what do they feel is missing in the goals? And so the information we got back, for example, on the tree canopy and that sort of thing from the tree board, as part of the feedback today, was useful and informed the plan. And so having folks have an opportunity to tell us what they want to see in the plan that they feel is not there, that's all I really need.
Okay, that's a good point.
Okay.
And I might just add, this is Drew, we would want to make sure that we've maybe there's some gaps that are out there, but that we're on the right track, and that we have listened in the past and we've captured the sentiment that folks feel should be included in the comprehensive plan. So some validation, but then also some exploration on maybe where we missed it. Yes, that's what we would be wanting to get.
Thanks, Drew. Okay, so at this point, would anyone in attendance for public comment, those who have been listening in to this long meeting, if you want to unmute and speak up, we'll be glad to hear your thoughts on this. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public comment. And so we're good with wrapping up this conversation then? All right. And so when we have our next meeting on the 28th, we'll be covering the rest of the chapters. And I guess in particular, looking at the implementation chapter. Will those all be ready by then, do you think?
Yes, so the two chapters that were missing to date was transportation, and that has, we do have a draft of transportation, and then also implementation. And so we will incorporate all of the changes to the strategies that we heard tonight into the implementation matrix. And then if there are additional changes that come out of our discussion on housing and land use and community services, those will have to be incorporated after the fact.
Thank you. Okay, so then let's then move on to other business. Is there any other business for us to think of? No, then seeing none, then Leslie, City Council report, what's going on?
Yeah, just a couple of items. We met last Thursday and we repealed the city code requiring registration and inspections of rental dwelling units. We haven't been doing that program. It's been at least 5 years, and some people thought it was been 8 years since we've done that program. So we repealed that with the plan to revisit that next budget season next year. And then we had the ball field at Maury River, and that was approved unanimously. And then we had a lot of discussion on the budget, which we did not adopt at our last meeting, but we plan to do it at the 21st. And we're looking at about a 10% cut overall, and we're being conservative at this point with our forecasts, and hopefully making adjustments so that we can meet our budget, and hopefully things will go better than we're expecting, and we can adjust it quarterly and make some changes later in the year. But right now we're looking at a lot of cuts, and so the budget is online. A couple of things: we have the police chief position open. We're not going to, Mark Riley is filling in. He's doing a wonderful job, but so there was one police position that's missing. We're not going to fill that yet. The city pool, the outdoor pool, we're not planning to open for the season. We've made lots of cuts to equipment, delaying those purchases, things like that. And that's all I have.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that, for that news. Unfortunate and necessary. Okay. So, yes.
Wait, questions.
Oh, pardon me? Yeah, any questions for Leslie? Sorry about that. Yeah. Camille? Or to Matt, I don't know who was first.
Yeah, I had a question about the apartment. What was the first item that you reversed an issue, and what are the implications of that?
Rental inspections. We had code that required rental inspections every 4 years, or when the property's changed, and it was only in certain districts too. But we haven't been doing that. Part of it was brought up, well, one, to prevent substandard housing, but also because we had so many student rentals. We still have a lot of apartments, but we don't have student rentals. But we haven't been implementing that program in years, and so we needed to take it out of the code and revisit it.
And Leslie, is that right? This is Pat, from what I saw in the paper, that there were some potential liability issues for the city, that if they had it on the books and weren't doing it, they could
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Camille, do you have a question for Leslie?
Yeah, I was going to move to adjourn.
Oh. John looks like he has a question.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to do it, John, and bring up something I should have done minutes ago. For Arnie, the agenda for the next meeting is only the comp plan on?
That's a good question.
Right.
Okay, because I think Camille's point is earlier comment that it'll be the time then maybe we can have a more substantive discussion among ourselves over the values and strategies. And so I just want to make sure we have an opportunity to do that as best we can in the time that we have. So.
Good. And since we already have the housing, the land use, and the community facilities chapter in our possession now, people can take a good another look at it, and any comments they have, we can get those in. And that should probably facilitate the conversation on those. All right. I think Camille had something she wanted to do.
Before I make the motion, Pat, I want to thank you again for your facilitation of these Zoom meetings. This is all very different for us in terms of planning commission, and I think you've done a very masterful job. So thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
I second that.
Well, Kelly pretty much ran this one, so thank you, thank you, Kelly and her group for sitting in here the whole time. I think we all are pretty impressed with what we're reading and talking about tonight.
Yes, thank you for
pleasure.
The quality of the discussion is reflection of the quality of the work.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the the finish line on this, and I think it's getting pretty exciting.
That said, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye, aye, aye.
Opposed, hang up on yourself. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great
You
night.
all.
Thank you.
Play with the dogs and cats.
Bye.